Uh, a very good morning to everybody who's here, and good evening to Roanna, ma'am. My name is Ilhana, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the Stories of the Indian Diaspora series with reference to the Tell Me Your Story Reviews June 2021 project, which is essentially inviting stories on the Indian diaspora. The purpose behind this project is to investigate ambition based movement under our annual theme of migration, resettlement, and displacement. And today we are honored to have with us Roanna Gonsalves and Ankita Dutta. So, Roanna Gonsalves is the author of The Permanent Resident, which is published in India and South Asia as Sunita D'Souza Goes to Sydney. She was born and brought up in Mumbai and attended St. Xavier's College. She moved to Australia as an international student in 1998. She is the recipient of the Prime Minister's Australia Asia Endeavour Award and is also the co founder, co editor of Southern Crossings. She has a PhD and has also been invited as keynote speaker and panelist at numerous literary events. She has been teaching, supervising, and mentoring emerging prose writers and screenwriters within communities, schools, literary organizations, and institutions such as the New York University Sydney, UNSW, Western Sydney University, Macquarie University, and the Australian Film, Television, and Radio School. Her research interests are in the sociology of the arts, social media, creativity studies, and post-colonial literatures. Welcome, ma'am. It's an honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Ilhana. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for having me.
And Ankita has completed her master's in English. She is currently pursuing a B.Ed besides English, Bengali, and Hindi. She is also adept in Sanskrit. She's interested in dystopian literature and is also a trained Bharatanatyam dancer. Welcome, Ankita. And with that, we'll begin our session for the day.
Yeah, hello, ma'am. So I'd then like to start this exciting session with my first question. So that would be taking cue from your association with the Goa writers, okay, where you wrote I is for that part. So can you render some subtle changes, that might have encountered, that you might have encountered during the transformation from a Goan to an Australian?
Oh, what a beautiful question, Ankita.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure if there has been a clean, bloodless transition. I think I'm very much an Indian and an Australian. So I grew up in Mumbai, and that is my home. Just as Sydney is also my home. It is now, it's 23 years since I moved to Sydney. And I moved here when I was 23 years old. So it's kind of, this interview is happening at a really interesting time in my life where I'm kind of poised. I've spent an equal number of years at home in Mumbai as I have in Sydney. It's like the seesaw is balanced at the moment. So I feel like I'm still very much connected to Mumbai, where I grew up. My mom's family are from Goa, and we spent many summer holidays there. So I do feel a connection to the Goan motherland, grandmotherland for me. And I still feel like that here in Australia. And Australia is a country with where over 300 languages are spoken. Before colonization, there were over many hundreds, I think over 300 nations in the continent of Australia. Indigenous First Nations people in Australia, over 300 communities, with over many languages as well, just as we have in India, many languages and dialects as well. So I feel like I am Australian. I'm not white Australian, but I think there are many different ways to be Australian, just as I think there are many different ways to be Indian. And I claim both. And I feel that I am very much connected to both places and countries and people, communities.
Thank you, ma'am. So now Ilhana would be asking you the next question.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am. So my first question for you today is based off of your book, The Permanent Resident. And it's a collection of stories which are essentially sort of capturing the experience of the lives of 21st century immigrants. And I wanted to know what inspired you to write a series of stories, most of them that are dealing with, the clash of cultures, and even, the sense of wanting to find your identity in a new place. You're trying to navigate where exactly you stand. So, and also in addition to that, given that you came to Australia as an international student, did any of it stem from any personal experience?
Yeah, excellent questions. Thank you, Ilhana. Very complex questions, and I'll respond by answering the first question first. So I think as writers, everything we write is about uh, the writer themselves because it's filtered through our imaginations. But my book is very much fiction. It's not autobiography, it's not nonfiction. It's very much fiction, and the material I've used to create that fiction, that imaginative work, it has been based. Some things have been based on my personal life, some things that I've overheard um, from conversations that on the bus, and the train, media reports. So I've used my source material has come from many different places, including my own life. But then that has been filtered through my imagination and then rendered on the page in fiction through fictional characters. So while it's like with any work, it's all about the writer. The book is all about me, and yet nothing about me, if you know what I mean. And I really hang on to that. It is a work of fiction because for me, what you can do with fiction is just, you can do a lot more. You can tell the truth in fiction in a way that you can't in with nonfiction and biography, etc. In relation to the first question about coming here as an international student, sorry, Ilhana, can you please repeat? I lost my train of thought there because
No,
I
no,
was
no, that's
really
completely
animated
all
by the
right.
second question. Sorry.
I was asking what had so I think you answered my second question first.
Yes.
And my first question was about what inspired you to write about this like clash of
Yeah.
cultures and this
Yes. Yeah.
the journey of
Yes.
finding yourself,
Yeah.
your identity navigation.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So I wrote for many reasons. Firstly, because I love to write. It's the one thing I can do. I feel like I can do well, and it gives me, maybe others don't think I can do it well, but I feel I like writing. It gives me pleasure. It gives me joy. And so that's why I have been writing ever since I was a child. So to write has always been part of who I am. And so that's why I've been writing fiction for some time, and so put together this collection of stories. And I deliberately chose, of course, to write about people like me, because as many writers have said, write the book that you want to read. Write the book that you want to read, as many different writers have said over the years, over many, many centuries. And so I wrote the book that I wanted to read and I couldn't find anywhere else. And that was a book about immigrants, first generation immigrants coming into Australia and trying to find their place in a new country, in a new culture. And so that was the primary impulse to write the book that I wanted to read. To see someone like myself represented in Australian literature. Yes, there is a long history of culturally diverse writers writing in Australia. And I saw myself as being part of that long tradition of writing from the margins, so to speak, not the mainstream. I also wanted to write these particular stories because I wanted to chronicle the lives of women in Australia who are not from the mainstream, who come from the periphery. And I wanted to, one of the questions I was trying to work out for myself was, what are the many different ways in which to be Indian? What are the many different ways in which to be Australian? And so I also wanted to look at the complexities within the Indian community. So not at all to paint our communities as perfect, not at all. In fact, each of my stories interrogates um, class hierarchies, class hypocrisy, religious hypocrisy, and the inequalities perpetuated by the patriarchy, by whiteness, etc. And so these are some of the reasons that I wanted to write these stories, to chronicle, to to navigate questions that I was thinking about myself, and to see myself represented in fiction in Australia and in India.
Thank you, ma'am. Over to Ankita now.
So just because you were telling us about like why you wanted to write, so I would like to ask you like what made you write that? I mean, what ignited the writer in you? I mean, India and Australia, okay, so they are like two diverse and very distinct cultures. So like how distinguished were their respective effects on your personal life? So
Yeah.
from those effects, did that writer get ignited in you? So that would be my question.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful question. Thank you, Ankita. I think writers come from readers. I've always been a very big reader. Right from the time I was a child, my mother used to work at Glaxo Laboratories in Worli, in Mumbai, and just amazingly, Glaxo had a library for their employees, and Mom would bring back books, magazines, like from everything from women's era and Savvy and Femina to as we as we kind of got more and more into the books she was bringing in, she'd bring back all sorts of novels and comic books, etc. So right from the time I was very small, I was encouraged to read, and I was given the resources to pursue my love for reading. Um, and that's a very privileged position to be in, I think, because I was very lucky to have the family that I grew up in, a family that nurtured my my desire, my pleasure in reading, and didn't say, "Oh no, 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 no! You become an engineer, you become a doctor or a lawyer." They were very, very extremely supportive, and I feel very, very lucky. In fact, I'm on. I have not. Or maybe that's too much information. I was going to tell you about my children, but that's too much information. Let's just stick to the question. Um, so what ignited the stories and what ignited the writerly kind of side of my personality? Reading ignited that. Reading in India, Target, Tinkle, Amar Chitra Katha, all of those stories that we grew up with in the 70s and 80s. And then reading in Australia as well. I did English literature at university in St. Xavier's College. I was very lucky to be taught by some amazing teachers like Eunice D'Souza, Shefali Shah, Sangeeta Dutta. And before that at school, I had some really fantastic teachers at the two schools that I went to. And so through a lot of encouragement from family, from teachers at school do such an amazing job and are real nurturers and of love for reading, love for literature. And I think a combination of family and brilliant teachers at school and university, college, that is what ignited that is what gave me the confidence to think that, oh, this is great. I love this. Like, I want to do more of this. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. That was great to hear, actually. Thank you, ma'am. Ilhana?
Yes, okay. Ma'am, my second question is also about your book, The Permanent Resident, and um, it's on several lists, and it's part of the syllabi of a lot of courses, and it's also being studied and analyzed in the field of literature. So I had a question regarding something that I've noticed is that a lot of time did, before the book did so well, did you have any concerns about your audience and how diverse the audience would be? because a lot of times the work of South Asian writers doesn't go beyond the South Asian audience. So, did you have any concerns about whether your book would have a really broad
Hmm.
outreach?
Yeah, that is a very good question. Actually, that's a very good question that goes to the heart of why do we write. And I think I write for myself first. Because I found that if I keep thinking about my audience, I just get a bit muddled and confused, and I don't know whom to please. I'm trying to please too many people. Um, Maybe that is a smarter way to do it and earn lots of money, through building a business plan for the novel you're writing. But I can't do that. I have to tell the stories that I want to tell, that come to me. Of course, it is a lot of labor, imaginative labor, creative labor on the page. As you well know, both of you, it's a lot of work to write, to create anything of value. But I think you have to write for yourself first, or one particular person in mind first. So I was writing for myself. Uh, I wanted to tell particular stories, and I wanted to do it in a way that was beautiful. I didn't, because I think everyone can tell stories. We can all tell stories. We can all write, but to write in a way that's engaging for readers, I think that takes a lot of practice. Like playing an instrument, it takes a lot of practice. Or dancing. Ankita, Bharatnatyam dancer, you would have spent years and years of practice in
Yes.
Bharatnatyam. Yeah. And so writing for so when I was writing the stories, I did not think about who would be reading them. I just wrote them in order to please someone, a reader like myself. But after the book came out, I was really pleasantly surprised that actually people who are not like me have been reading the book and coming up to me and telling me how much they liked it and what they liked about it. And that is such an honor for a writer, to have readers who appreciate the work and who get something out of the work, who see what you're doing, who see you. It's just the most amazing feeling. So I feel very lucky to have had that from readers.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Ankita?
Yeah. So, ma'am, we have been talking already about your institutional scholarship to Australia. So, that must have been an important event since you've been a Bombay girl throughout your life, like the half of your life.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you the which aspects could have made you mesmerized with the fresh look hail. Okay, so gave you the positive vibes and the air of acquaintance with the atmosphere around like that.
In
So,
Australia.
yes, ma'am.
Oh, what a
Like
lovely
you adjusted to the fresh environment. I mean, a new environment.
new environment. Um, that's a very good question about. So when I first came here, so are you talking about like the images that we see of Australia in India, those images of beaches, etc., and how is that what you mean? Sorry, Ankita.
Ma'am, I want to know what could have made you mesmerized. I mean, you went from India to
Oh,
Australia.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Okay,
like,
got it.
what did you like about Australia?
Yes. Okay, great question. So I came here as an international student, not on a scholarship.
Okay.
It was very expensive to come here, and I worked all kinds of jobs for many years, at petrol stations as a waitress, door to door, market research. I used to drop like flyers in letter boxes, etc. I mean, it's nothing unusual. So many people do this, when you first come to the country. And so I but I was willing to do that because I knew that I felt I wanted to come here. I felt at home, but I also felt out of place as well. Like it's a weird feeling of feeling like you want to belong, but also feeling like you don't belong yet. And I think that's because of when I came here, I slowly realized that actually Australia has been colonized by, it was colonized by the English, and indigenous people here were displaced. There was a genocide. There's like ongoing colonization, actually. The effects have been horrendous. Like with us, we had the population, we had the masses, we had our freedom struggle, etc. And the British, we got them to leave. It was a long process.
They quit.
But
Yeah, they
that didn't
quit.
happen in, sorry?
They quit India. Yeah, the Britishers quit
Yeah,
India.
the whole our freedom struggle, quit India, Gandhi ji,
Mm,
and Nehru, and all of that. Like the long history of the freedom struggle against the British, but also against the Portuguese in Goa and other colonial powers in India. But that it didn't happen here. In fact, the colonizers still live here. It's a settler colony. So coming here, you realize, oh, I am. I come from a country that was colonized, and now I'm in a country that also was colonized by the same colonizers, but they are still here, and they are the mainstream here. In fact, the indigenous people are not the mainstream. And so I'm complicit in this ongoing colonial project. I am a colonizer now, actually. And it's because of people like me that indigenous people are still continue to be displaced, still continue to suffer the effects of colonization in many different ways. So realizing that was like a big, huge thing for me. It happened over a period of time, and it's just made me. There's no quick fix to this. Like I'm one tiny part of a large problem. But I think it's very important to be aware as migrants, as immigrants to another country, about the privileges we have. Yeah, the constraints we have. I'm a woman. I'm Indian. Dark skin. I don't look like a typical Australian, but I am also complicit in the colonizing process of indigenous people, the First Nations people here. So I'm speaking to you from Gadigal land. The Gadigal people used to be the custodians of this land. Now, of course, it's all like a Western country, so to speak. But we always try and remember the indigenous people who were here for 40, 50, 60,000 years. They have lived through the ice age here in this country. They know about climate change. I mean, they're a source of amazing knowledge. And to understand that, oh my gosh, I'm part of the colonizing process here that is continuing to wipe out all of this ancient knowledge, these rich traditions, these amazing communities of people who continue to survive, actually, and some of them are doing very well despite terrible constraints and terrible effects of colonization. So to realize that was a big thing for me, and I try and address that in my writing as much as I can. It's a small thing to do. I mean, when people are actually dying in custody, in jails, etc. But yeah, so that was a big realization for me, more than thinking, oh wow, I want to be here because it's such a beautiful country. Yeah, it is a beautiful country, but at the heart of it is this unresolved wound of colonization, and the land has never been ceded. There was never any treaty, there was never any agreement between indigenous people and the colonizers to say, okay, yes, you can come here. It was taken by force. And we as immigrants are part of that process. So it's good, for me at least, I need to keep remembering that and addressing that in any way that I can.
Thank you, ma'am. But then every droplet makes the ocean. So yeah.
True, very true. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, Ilhana, please.
Yes. So, ma'am, my next question is about your radio documentary series on the tip of a billion tongues.
Yes.
And it aims at capturing, the social political landscape in India through multilingual writers. And I wanted to know what your interest is in the Indian political scenario and how vested you are in it, given that you're no longer living in India, like you're no longer living in Mumbai and you're in Sydney.
Yes. Thank you. That's a very, very good question, because it's very easy for someone like me outside of India now to say all these grand things and make these grand criticisms without actually suffering the consequences at the coal face. I'm not living in India, so I'm not dealing with the everyday reality of living in a country with the current government, etc. So I am very conscious that I have the privilege of speaking from outside, but I also feel very invested because I'm made of India. That's what I'm made of. I'm made of Mumbai. I'm made of the 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 land and the waters of that country. That's who I am. And so, of course, I'm completely invested in what's happening in India. But I have the privilege of actually being outside of it, and I don't want to be that person who sits in an armchair and offers suggestions and solutions without actually facing the issues on the ground. But certainly, I feel very invested, and I feel that if I try and do small things in my own small way in order to raise awareness or to write about things, with courage, if I can. Yeah,
I have
very
a
invested.
I have a follow-up question. I would like to know what sort of inspired you to create a series like this, and I mean, was it because of your own interest? Because, as you mentioned, there is a very obvious connection to India, and
Yeah.
um, or
Yeah.
was it also because you sort of wanted to, like you mentioned, contribute to bringing light to the issues in the political scenario?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. That was part of the previous question as well, which I didn't answer properly. But yes, the reason I made that four-part series, I tried to make it satirical and funny, but under the comedy is a real serious critique of as an insider who's now also an outsider, my position as an Indian in diaspora, there's a real critique under the satire, as all satire is actually, whether good or bad. There is a critique there of what is going on, and I think our writers are the beacons of light, of hope, and I wanted to pay homage and honor I didn't have the time, space, or money to involve every single amazing writer in India. We have an embarrassment of riches with literature in India, long literary traditions going back hundreds and thousands of years. But I wanted to record the different languages in which uh, we speak and we write in and we create beauty in. And so that is why I had I had the opportunity. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation commissioned me to make this series of this four-part series on the tip of a billion tongues, where I interviewed writers and I requested them to read their work in the language in which they write. So we had writers from many different languages in that series, and it's freely available to listen to on the ABC website. You can just Google "On the Tip of a Billion Tongues" and you'll have a four-part series, one based in Bombay, one in Kolkata, one in Delhi, and one in Goa. But I've included writers from other languages as well, not just the languages of those four cities. Goa as a state, but so the main reason I did that was because of my investment as an Indian, but also to chronicle the beauty, the variety, the diversity of literature in contemporary India, and to bring that to new audiences in Australia and across the world, because this podcast series is available globally for free via the ABC website, or it's also I've put links on my own website. So yeah, it's just a tiny homage, a tiny way to honor uh, the to honor my literary influences, my literary ancestors, my literary idols in different languages. Because as you know, when we grow up in India, there are many different languages that influence you. You may speak in one particular language, that might be your main language, but you have so many different linguistic influences. And I wanted to bring a little bit of that to new audiences in Australia and across the world in a small way.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think you answered that question wonderfully, and also like you covered everything that I wanted to know. So thank you very much for
Okay.
that.
Thank you, Ilhana.
Ankita?
Yeah. Ma'am, so since we're talking about colonization, we have talked about the radio documentary series and your novel, so anthology of short stories. So I would like to ask you, do you have, any regrets? Have you ever had regrets about, regarding any major decision you might have taken already? Any
Such a
regrets in
Yeah,
life?
such a great question. No regrets, but maybe that's because I'm a foolish optimist all the time. I think I have zero regrets. I mean, of course, I've made many mistakes, so many. I hope I would never wish them on my worst enemy, the mistakes that I've made. So, certainly lots of mistakes, but no regrets as such. I mean, everything has contributed towards the person I am and the kind of work I do and has influenced my writing. So, actually, coming to think of it, no regrets. Mistakes, yes, but I can see now. I mean, I used to have regrets, but I can see now that everything that has gone on in my life has made me the person I am today at this moment. So, yeah.
So that was great, but then if you are again provided a chance to like go back in time and still choose to study in Australia, like would you grasp that opportunity, like to go to a white country as a non-conformist native, probably?
Yeah, good question. I think I would. I would because I have benefited a lot from being here. Yes, of course, there continue to be many constraints, but I think this is my home now. I have children here as well, um, but I think I would. Yeah. Although, of course, I'm saying that now because it's so easy to be in touch with family back home and to feel Indian to travel. We can't travel at the moment because of COVID, but in the past it's easy to go back and forth between the countries. That's why. Maybe if you told me if you leave India you will never come back, then I would not go, I think. But I would change that. But looking back, if I knew that I could come back to India, back and forth, yeah, I would do it. I would do it because yeah, I feel like I don't feel any less of an Indian. Of course, I'm not. I don't live in India, and I don't live at the coal face. So in that sense, I'm not someone who has any right to speak actually about what's going on in India. But I do feel that I feel very very connected, and yeah, yeah, I would certainly travel to different parts of the world, but knowing that I could always come back home.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ilhana.
Okay, so ma'am, your work has been very highly praised, and you've been called a bold Australian voice. So when I read that review in particular, I was very curious, and I'd like to know if you think of yourself as an Australian voice, and if yes, you do, what about your Indian voice? And more so, is there and like of course there is intersectionality between the two, and what is the extent of that intersectionality?
What a beautiful question. Thank you, Ilhana. I think, yes, I do see myself as being an Australian voice. Whether bold or not is not for me to say. I try and be courageous where I can, not always. I have many flaws, like because I'm a human. All humans, we have multiple flaws, and we can't always be as courageous as we want to be. But I certainly try. And yes, I do claim that I am an Australian voice, but I also claim that I am an Indian voice. I am very much an Indian voice. I can't not be. That is who I'm made of. That is what I'm made of, rather. So, in terms of, I'm not someone who can choose. I don't think it's possible for me because the work I do is very much about the kind of person I am, the communities I'm connected with, and I certainly feel I'm both, absolutely, not one or the other.
All right. Thank you. Uh, Ankita?
Yeah, yeah. So like we were talking about India and Australia a lot. So I would like to ask you about the diasporic point through the diasporic point of view. Like Australia is generally the west and the east. Okay, so it's more of
Yes,
Western people in the east.
yes.
But then you have been to different nations. You must have a global experience. So would you like prefer to state that Indian diasporas, okay, across all the cultures, they are highly contrasting. I mean, Indian diasporas in different parts of the world, they are different from each other. Would you say that, or you would say that they are more or less the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there are many differences, of course. We can't, no Indian community is the same. No Indian person is the same. In fact, we ourselves as people change all the time. We're in a constant state of change and renewal and growth and regression sometimes, maybe. But so certainly, all Indian communities in diaspora are not the same. Not just in terms of the obvious differences in terms of language and the way we look and skin color and accents, etc., but also in terms of aspirations, in terms of our likes and dislikes, etc., our investment in the countries in which we find ourselves in, or we choose to go to. Our investments are different, not just not financial investments, but social investments, investments of time, of energy, of hope. Not all Indian communities are the same. But having said that, it's very few Indians who actually have the means to leave, right? You have to have certain financial uh, capital, certain amounts of financial capital, social capital, connections in order to apply for to even read. First of all, read the forms required to apply for a passport, make the application, have the money to pay for it, have the money to support yourself outside. So, in that sense, most people in diaspora are very much middle class, from India. Of course, when we move to the new country, of course, then we possibly, have to work jobs that we would never work in India. But that's an important thing that I also went through, an important lesson in humility and in understanding the way we treat people from who are not of our class background in India. So shameful. I'm very ashamed of my own behavior in the past. But I feel that there is a great diversity in aspiration, in intention, in investment amongst communities in diaspora across the world. Indian communities in Australia, in Sydney, very, very different. But there is the similarity of having the means to get out of one particular country to travel to another. That is a self selecting middle class, I would say. So, in that sense, the similarity is one of class, but within that similarity, there are huge differences.
Okay, that was a perfect answer, I would say, and what I would have expected from this question that I posed. Okay, so Ilhana, your
Um,
question.
yeah, I do. I have my last question. Ma'am, so you left as a student, and of course, I'm sure you must have been excited about going to a new place to study. For a lot of people, it's a dream to go abroad. For me, it
Yes,
is to go
yes.
abroad eventually. And I want to know that when you left to study, did you anywhere have in your mind, did you already know that you would settle? Or did you think you'd be coming back? Did you know that, did you have any ideas of migrating at that
Yeah.
point?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I did not. I just wanted to get out, have an adventure, so to speak. And that is common to a lot to young people everywhere, not just in India, everywhere and across the generations and centuries. Young people have always wanted to have adventures, to get out of the place that they grew up in, to try new things, to see the world. And we don't think. at least I didn't think about, the future as much as maybe I should have. But I didn't really even think about about migration or anything. Not at all. It was purely, let's go and see what happens. Purely, first of all, to study and then see what happens. Certainly no grand plans at that stage. Yeah, so yeah, I did think that I would come back for sure. That was the plan. But then increasingly, I just felt more and more drawn to this place here. While I think I knew I could always go back home. Maybe that is why that gave me the courage and the confidence to build a life here, because I knew I had options. Like home, my parents now live with me, but they were in India. All of these, when I first came here, my sister was there, grandparents, aunties, uncles, etc. Friends I went to school with, I worked with, went to college with. So I just felt, I just knew that that's home and I can always come back. So I knew that I would come back. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Ankita, over to you.
Yeah, so ma'am, that would be my last question, and I would ask you about your family, because we are just talking about your parents. So like familial support is like a colossal requirement. Okay, when we travel abroad. So do you think that's the ultimate need? Okay, when an identity enters diaspora. So is
Yeah,
it?
great question. You need support. You need money to live. Where that money comes from can be anywhere. It can be family, can be you working yourself, as I did as well here, or winning the lottery or something. Kaun banega crorepati, maybe you win that from somewhere. You need money from somewhere, but support of your family, it was just so crucial. The support of my parents meant that I can write. I've always worked multiple jobs. I teach a lot. I do a lot of community work as well, in order to earn a living. But the emotional support of my parents, they look after my children, etc. It's just been just amazing. I feel very, very lucky to have that. So yes, the support of some sort of emotional support from family is crucial. And yes, money from somewhere, some source, either through your own hard work, or there are some people lucky enough to inherit wealth. I'm not one of them, but there are many people who inherit wealth, and yeah, good for them. Use it to create beautiful work.
Okay, ma'am. So like family is very important if we travel abroad. Okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
ma'am. So, thank you so much, because you spared us so much of your precious time.
Oh, it's
And
such a pleasure.
yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And like you have really been a guiding light for many of us, who might think of relocating to foreign nations for search of better opportunities,
Yeah.
study or work, or like. Thank you so much for that insightful experience.
Oh, you're welcome, Ankita. Thank you for your lovely words. And to that, I would say absolutely explore all the opportunities you can get. Go away and see what life is like outside. But remember who you are, and remember who you are in the new country. How are you complicit in the power struggles of the oppressed in that country that you find yourself in? You have to think about your own position as an immigrant, and your privileges, but also your constraints. But absolutely go for it and go and explore as much as you can.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Our heartfelt regards.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
so
you,
much,
Ankita.
ma'am. Thank you for a great session.
Thank you, Ilhana. Thank you both for such amazing questions. I feel very honored that you have considered my work so thoughtfully and asked such amazing questions. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Ilhana. Thank you, Ankita.
It's our pleasure, ma'am.